Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to this Performance Governance and Audit Committee meeting on Thursday, the 24th of September 2020. My name is Councillor Elaine Bamford and I'm the chairman of this committee. You'll have to bear with me because I'm not in the best of health. My voice is a bit dodgy, so bear with me. So this meeting is held on new regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 situation. And there are just a few housekeeping issues to run through. First of all, please could I ask everyone present in this meeting to ensure your microphone remains muted and your video feed off when not addressing the committee. This will reduce background noises and avoid unintentional disturbances. The meeting is being hosted remotely, streamed live and recorded. And by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Members are reminded that apart from indicating you wish to speak or that you have to leave the meeting, the chat function should only be used for questions and not any other purpose. Please do not use the raise hand function as that is not available on all members' devices. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page or paragraph number. And last, if members need to leave the meeting at any point, please do make this known and use the chat function to signify that you need to leave the meeting. Now, may I ask officers taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Dodson, please.
Good afternoon. Paul Dodson, Director of Strategy, Performance and Governance.
Thank you. Ms. Donnelly.
Emma Donnelly, Video and Internal Audit Manager.
We don't. Oh yes, here she is. Yeah. Thank you. Dominic Geller.
Sorry, that's Damien Geller.
Damien, sorry. I've just got Dominic on my prompt. Right, sorry about that. I should have realised.
Specialist community.
Mr. Holmes.
Good afternoon, Richard Holmes, Director of Service Delivery.
Ms. Hughes.
Good afternoon, Cheryl Hughes, Programmes, Performance and Governance Manager.
Mr. Leslie.
Chris Leslie, Director of Resources.
Mr. Rubins.
Greg Rubins from BDO Internal Audit.
Thank you, welcome. And Miss Sanguilinoto. I don't know whether I pronounced that correctly. I'm sorry if I haven't.
Good afternoon, Azara Sanguilinoto, External Audit Manager.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome. Mr. Wisdom.
Craig Wisdom from Deloitte, External Audit Partner.
Thank you, welcome. And Berna.
Good afternoon, members. Berna Casey, Clerk to the meeting.
And do we have any other members? Sorry, any other officers present?
Not that I can see, Chairman.
No, okay. Thank you very much, Berna. Now, Berna, could you now carry out a roll call of members to confirm who is in attendance? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I will call your name in alphabetical order, starting with Councillor Bamford.
Well, I'm here. Thank you, Berna.
Thank you. Councillor B.S. Beale.
Present. Good afternoon.
Councillor Mrs. Channer.
Present, Berna. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon, Berna. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hurd.
Good afternoon, Berna and colleagues. Present.
Councillor Jarvis.
Present, Berna. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Keys. Councillor Keys, I know we have him. He was, sorry.
He's here.
Present. Good afternoon, all.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Keys. Councillor Nunn.
Present, Bernard. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Stilts.
Good afternoon, Bernard. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
Yes, Bernard, good afternoon. Here.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Yes, I'm present. Thank you, Bernard, and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, members. Chairman, could I ask any other members in attendance to please introduce themselves now?
Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Anybody else?
Good afternoon. Yes, Anne Hull, Councillor Hull.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hull. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, move on to apologies for absence. Bernard, we've got
yes, we received apologies for absence from Councillor Skeens and Councillor Stamp.
Okay, thank you. So then, members, we go on to the minutes of the 30th of July 2020, found on pages 5 to 12. So I just need you to approve these as a true and accurate record. Do you want me to go through page by page, or are you happy for me to take it on block?
Happy for on block, Chairman, unless anyone's got any issues, but approve them. Agree.
Agreed.
Agreed?
Thompson agreed.
Everyone's happy. Okay, lovely.
Agreed.
So we'll take those as accepted. Thank you. Declarations of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests, or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8, inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they also are required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the needs arise throughout the meeting. If any member has an interest to declare, please use the chat function to indicate, and I'll invite you to speak. So, have we got anyone, Bernard?
Yes, Councillor Channer.
Councillor Channer. Go ahead, Councillor Channer.
Yes, I've just had to unmute my toolbars change. It got me out in a different place to where it used to be.
Your hand, Councillor Channer.
Yes, I use both actually.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, well, I did chat and hand just to make sure, because with the toolbar in the new place. Yes, just to advise, Madam Chairman, non-pecuniary. I'm also a member of Essex County Council, and there's several items where there's reference in with things that actually do link with Essex, such as the flooding, and SUDS is mentioned as well. So bearing in mind the involvement and the direction, and they mentioned planning in one of the things about what we might not be doing, but Essex certainly does with the authority, and anywhere else on the agenda where Essex might have a link or is mentioned, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. Anyone else, Benno?
Councillor Durham has his hand up.
Yeah, Chairman, apologies, my chat is not working. It's spooling.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll look out for your hand, although it's not really accepted, but there we go.
It's either that or nothing, or me interrupting, Chairman. I apologise.
No problem.
Yes, as a non-pecuniary interest, as a member of Essex County Council, for the same reasons as been explained by Councillor Channer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. Anyone else, Bernard?
No, nobody else.
Okay, good. So we move on to public participation. I can advise that we've not received any submissions from members of the public. So we move on to item 6, which is the internal audit reports. There are progress, follow-up recommendations, corporate governance and flooding risk management. So again, members, if you wish to speak, please use the chat function and keep your points referring to the page number if possible. So we have with us Greg Rubins from Internal Audit BDO, and he'll present the progress report and the follow-up recommendations report. Thank you, Mr. Rubins.
Thank you. So the progress report, I'll just talk to page 17 of your papers. You'll see that we are presenting 2 reports today. They're the last 2 reports from the 1920 programme, so that concludes that. And we have a number of audits underway for this current year. So obviously it was a slow start because of COVID, but we'll be catching up, and as long as we can continue working, we will complete the programme. Just to say, in terms of the audits, the list of audits, we will be doing 2 pieces of advisory work this year. One is related to your fraud risk assessment, and you might remember that there were some actions to follow up on that and provide some training and support. So we'll continue to do that, and we will update the fraud risk assessment as well. And secondly is some work in relation to accounting standard IFRS 16, which is to do with the accounting for leases. We will be providing some training and support to officers as part of that. So that won't end up with an audit report, but it will be part of our internal audit work to support the council. I'll now move on to the follow-up, and I'll take questions on the 2 reports together. So the follow-up report actually takes us to September, so it is current. I think it says in the covering paper February, but it is actually September. So this is the latest position, and you'll see that we've been able to sign 2 recommendations offers completed, and there is only 1 recommendation that is yet to be completed, and that relates to your waste strategy, which is now being incorporated into your new climate strategy. So once that is completed, we should be able to sign that recommendation off as well. So I would say, good progress in terms of implementing recommendations. So as promised, I'll pause at this point, take any questions on the progress report and follow-up report, and then after that we'll talk through the 2 detailed reports that are contained in your papers on corporate governance and flood management.
Okay, thank you. So Bernard, have we got anyone who wants to speak on either internal audit or the progress report, please?
Yes, Chairman. Councillors Hurd, Swain and Nunn.
Okay.
Like to speak.
So Councillor Hurd, could you just say when you ask your question what report you're asking your question about, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm referring to Appendix 2, which is on page 26. So I'll start with that one. It's talking about a fraud risk assessment, and the council should commission external resource to develop, etc. I see this is down as a high priority, and I welcome, of course, further training on that. But can I ask how many cases of fraud have we actually identified since the 1st of January? That's my first question. The second part is on the next page, page 27. I'm hoping that somebody can help me with some words which appear to be missing, because where it's got recommendations overdue, it says create an environmental and waste management strategy. And also on the other side where it says current progress, it looks as though some words have been missed out there, because it says waste strategy has been replaced by climate change strategy has been taken over by the new lead community officer. I'm not quite sure what that means. The next one I've got is on page 32, which speaks about the key findings. This is mainly to do with the overview and scrutiny and the effectiveness of that committee. And also what I'd like to ask is about whether or not these, the number of cancelled committees are justifiable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurd. Mr. Rubins, would you be able to answer those questions, please?
I'll be able to answer one of them, I'm afraid, but I'll explain why I can't answer the other 2. So the first one, the one that I can answer is relating to the missing words. Apologies, it's not perhaps as clear as it could be. So this is on page 27. So when it says the recommendation was to create, it should say an, rather than and. So hopefully that explains that. And then obviously the progress which is provided by the council means that the waste strategy has been replaced by a climate change strategy, and this has been taken over by the new lead community officer to finalise the draft version. So just a couple of missing words there. In terms of the corporate governance report, if you don't mind, can we wait until Emma has presented that report, and then we'll take questions on that report. So we'll confirm then. And the last question was the number of fraud cases. I don't have that information. I mean, we're obviously looking at your current fraud strategy. That would be one for officers to respond to. So I don't know whether the Section 151 officer would be able to answer that one.
Thank you. I think he's indicated that he can do so. Mr. Leslie, would you like to just answer the fraud question, please?
Yes, of course. The DWP actually took over a lot of the fraud work around housing benefits, so they've been covering that. So aside from housing benefits and council tax benefits, I don't have those numbers. But in terms of actually other types of fraud activity, in terms of supplier fraud, payments, employee fraud, etc., I'm not aware of any of those sort of fraud activities taking place. So actually the amount of fraud is very low and non-existent in the other areas.
Is that answering your questions, Councillor Hurd? I know you asked a question about overview and scrutiny, but I think we all know the reason why that committee hasn't met is from lack of business. That's what we've been advised. But anyway, on your other 2 points, have the Mr. Rubins and Mr. Leslie answered your questions?
Well, I'm grateful for the clarification of the wording, and maybe that's something I should have seen, but I was rather confused by it. No, I think in relation to the other point, I wondered why it was a high priority then. If fraud is as low as it is, why is it such a high priority? Isn't there other things we could be getting on with, please?
Mr. Leslie, could you clarify that? Or Mr. Rubins?
I'm happy to talk about that, because we agreed at the time that it was high priority, because it is a requirement on councils to have an up-to-date fraud strategy and an action plan to address that strategy. It is actually a regulatory requirement. So we considered that to be high priority, because at the time you had nothing in place. You do now have some arrangements in place, so it certainly isn't high at the moment. And in fact, we believe the council's taking the right action to address that recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're happy with that? Thank you, Councillor Hurd. Councillor Swain, I think, was next, who had some questions. Are they on the internal audit or the follow-up recommendations?
No, the follow-up ones on corporate and flood risk management.
Well, we haven't got onto those yet, Councillor Swain. This is just internal audit and follow-up recommendations at the moment. So I will call you when we go over the other reports. Councillor Nunn, did you have some questions?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I do. Can I take you, please, to page 25? It says that whilst I'm noting that community safety recommendations are not due until October, but we're nearly in October. In fact, it's next week. Can we be reassured that that area will be ready for implementation?
Okay. Is that your only question?
No, my second question relates to page 32.
All right.
And on page 32, the internal audit corporate governance is quite critical of committees and their effectiveness and of member training. And I'm just curious to know what methodology was used to establish that, that opinion. How on earth do the auditors know about individual member skills, for example? Because unless other people tell me otherwise, I don't ever remember being interviewed about any skill base.
Okay, thank you. I take it this is mainly an officer question. Mr. Rubins, is it something you could answer?
Well, again, I think we haven't presented that report yet, but if you're asking me about it, if you actually look at the detailed findings, they're mainly around the structure that you have in place and whether you have the right training. So we're not saying that members don't have the right skills. We're just saying that it isn't formalised in terms of what training you do have and how it's provided. So you know, I think we were within our rights to point that out, and obviously we do compare you to other councils as well in terms of the sort of structures and support we'd expect to see in place.
Okay, thank you. The first question, Councillor Nunn, related to
the first question was about community safety regulations, which are not due to be implemented until October. The reason I ask this is because I've had concerns about community safety effectiveness in the past, and I'm wondering why this report, which is tabled to us today, says, well, actually I have to wait until October when these are going to be implemented, and October's next week. So I'm just wondering how ready we are to implement those recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Have we got an officer that could answer that question regarding safety? Would that be Mr. Holmes?
Yes, Chairman, I think I can help.
Okay,
I can offer reassurance that those have been looked at and are very much well in progress, if not almost completed. So I can give you assurance that it's been looked at, work is underway, and I say the recommendations are very much worked on now.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any? Yes, sorry, Councillor Chano has a question.
Okay. Councillor Chano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I was going to ask on Ovian scrutiny, but I'll wait now because we haven't had that report presented. So I will go to the one on page 27 to do with this climate change strategy and report. I'm not medium risk, or indicated as medium priority rather. I'm not quite clear then, when is this anticipated? It mentions that a draft report would go to strategy and resources. I'm not quite clear of the time frame of this. There's reference made to the others, but unless I've missed it, I couldn't see when this is anticipated. And I'd quite like to know that, having attended the Climate Change Commission meeting only recently. That's the Essex County Council one, by the way, but I attended with my Malden hat on.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Channer. I think Mr. Holmes might be able to answer that one.
I was just going to ask if Mr. Gieler could pick up that answer, because I think
okay.
it obviously accompanied Councillor Channer, and he's actually the officer responsible for drafting that.
Right.
So perhaps he can help us.
So, yeah, it's Damien Geller, isn't it? Yes, I'll get that right this time.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so just to advise, the climate change and environmental strategy and the waste element of it as well. There was a rough draft when I first joined around January time, and we agreed that there was more work and a larger scope to be taken into account. So we've pushed that document back until around December time for delivery. Now I'm currently working on the document as we speak in terms of first draft, just to go around internal partners, working towards that December deadline.
So I think Councillor Channer was asking when it would go to strategy and resources.
It would be, and you'll have to excuse my ignorance on the dates, but it would be whatever dates happen around December time for that.
So it'd be December time. Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Channer?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, members. So there's no other questions on those two reports. We'll move on to Appendix 3 and 4, which is the corporate governance audit and flooding risk management. Is Emma Donnelly presenting those?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay, I'll start with the corporate governance internal audit report. That's page 29. And we undertook a review of the council's governance arrangements, and we conducted interviews with key officers and also members to assess operational effectiveness of the current structures. And you'll notice we have issued a moderate report based on this work. And we noted that following the transformation of the council, there have been revised committees, updated terms of reference and frameworks established. Schemes of delegation were updated and reviewed in line with changes to structures. The gifts and hospitality registers are in place and they are being used. And the council is meeting all the requirements, the transparency code on the council's website in line with the public's right to know. We also find that there's been a review of committee structures in line with the Redmond review. That's been undertaken with proposed changes due to be implemented this month to ensure council committee makeup is in line with best practice. And we've also noted there have been improvements in performance and governance reporting, with more work being developed and underway at the minute. However, we find that there's currently not regular governance oversight at the PGA, including review of internal service KPIs. The Corporate Governance Working Group will now be monitoring performance via a new internal balance scorecard on regards to this. Secondly, we noted that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is not satisfying its purpose in its terms of reference or meeting regularly due to not having a business established. The Corporate Governance Working Group have considered this recommendation and have recommended that the committee continues with training and a clear remit to be established. Thirdly, we noted that member induction programs have not been formalised to support refresher training or progression. And we note that the members' onboarding process is also currently being reviewed to support this recommendation. And finally, we noted two low recommendations, one around the annual performance reviews of committees and the fact that those reviews not being embedded within the terms of reference. And this is being looked at to be included depending on capacity of officers. And also the scheme of delegation requires a minor amendment, which is currently being refreshed. If there's any questions, firstly on the corporate governance report. If not, I can move on to flooding and take them all at the end.
Okay, well, we'll take questions on corporate governance. I think, Councillor Swain, what's your question on corporate governance?
Yes, one or 2 points, yes. I do echo Councillor Nunn's comment about skills, but I think actually from the auditor's point of view, it's a case of proof of the pudding is in the eating. And if things haven't been done by either the PGA or Overview and Scrutiny, that is the proof that things haven't been done right and things should have been picked up. I don't think there's any real justification for the Overview and Scrutiny not having met. I mean, I can think of plenty of things it should have been doing. Perhaps it should pick up the fact, and the auditors perhaps should have picked up the point about the way in which the recommendations on committees and so on was handled directly by council, and surely should have gone to Performance Governance and Audit Committee first. To my mind, this is, and it's going to come up in the other section, the other audit too, it's an instance of the working group not really reporting as such to the body that appoints it and sets it up. And that, I think, is too opaque and is not informative enough for members. So this question about how working groups report to the bodies that set them up, to me, is one of the issues that Overview and Scrutiny should look at. There probably will be further discussion in the committees on Overview and Scrutiny, but to my mind, it has a quite distinct function. And it's not just a matter of, I mean, it's been very much framed in the context of an adversarial cabinet type system and a political opposition. But the scrutiny issue, as was outlined in the guidance from the government last year, is a more general thing in which members should be involved. Right, I think that's my comment on this particular audit. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I think mainly they were just comments rather than needing answers. I think we are, as we all know, we have a statutory annual on the 5th of November where a lot of these points that Councillor Swain has made will be addressed. So, you know, it's a different way forward now. So we hope the next corporate governance audit will be a bit nicer to us. Councillor Nunn, I think you wanted to say something on corporate governance.
Yes, I come back, Chair, to my point about page 32 about skill base, and I don't accept the response that I've had so far. In fact, I've got additional concerns now that Miss Donnelly has explained that she's interviewed members. Well, I don't know who they were, but I certainly haven't been interviewed, and I don't know if anybody else has on ONS and on this committee. But I can tell you that the lack of meetings with ONS is not through lack of trying and concern on the part of some members. You know, I do hope that that changes. But my question for Ms Donnelly is, which members did she interview, and how has she arrived at a conclusion that members are not satisfactorily skilled enough?
Ms Donnelly, do you want to answer that one? Sorry, it's putting you on the spot a bit, but yeah.
Sorry, I don't have the list of members that were interviewed in front of me, but I can definitely get that information and circulate it. But we did work with the corporate governance working group to meet with members. I'm not sure if anyone here on this call was interviewed as part of the audit, but I can circulate the list of people that were. In terms of the finding around members training, obviously that's we would look at that in terms of what our other councils are doing, and the fact that there isn't a formalised structure for refresher training or additional training as members might progress would be something that we would look to see that the council will be implementing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
well,
thank you, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the answer. But yes, I would like to know who was interviewed, because if nobody who's present here today was interviewed, that concerns me really. You know, how representative were those interviews? And actually, training and development starts on the basis of the starting point of the skill base of the individual. So, you know, I don't know how on earth we know what skills people do and don't have. So, but thank you. I'm happy to move on.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. But you know, I'd repeat again, we are going to address things going forward as from the statutory annual. So I'm sure overview and scrutiny will play a much more active role after that. Councillor Hurd, I think you wanted to say something on ONS.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think you may well have answered my query. Yes, I have concerns about who was interviewed. I mean, as leader of the opposition, I would have thought I'd have been a prime candidate to be interviewed. Indeed, that's something that I could have put to the group. I feel that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has been scaled down and down and down. So eventually they would say that there was no business. I know that there was business, and I think perhaps the terms of reference need to be revisited. I welcome your comments about a new way of working, and I look forward to doing that. But I am concerned that this report isn't giving a fair cross-section of those members who are on there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Head. So we'll go on, if there's no more questions on that one, on corporate governance, we'll go on to flooding risk management. Sorry, Berna.
Sorry, I think Councillor Channer and Councillor Jarvis had some comments.
Okay, Councillor Channer.
I think largely mine may have been met, Madam Chairman, but I think I did register with great interest, bearing in mind all I will say some comments I've made in the past. I think it was at corporate governance about the performance and PGA and the KPIs, and I'm glad to see that work will be done on those because I do feel very much this committee, and I think possibly you share, we do need to have a greater oversight of performance, and I think that has been pointed out now by the report before us. So in a way it backs up perhaps my feeling.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Councillor Channer. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, I noted two recommendations from the governance report. The first one regarding service level performance being challenged by PGA on a more regular basis, and that's welcome. The other recommendation, PGA should have an increased level of oversight of governance matters. I think this has been a common theme throughout the year. I've always been very surprised as PGA that we've met so regularly and yet not really had anything to talk about from a governance point of view. And so it's slightly disappointing that perhaps we have to wait for an internal audit to tell us what we probably should have known already, which is as a PGA committee, we should obviously be looking at governance issues on a regular basis. But look, the recommendation is that we're going to get a more quarterly assessment of governance issues, and that those issues are going to come to this committee, and I think that is to be welcome. What I would say, though, is I'd just like to ask the question of officers regarding the working group that exists, which is obviously reporting directly to Council on governance matters, because I certainly feel in a way that this committee has been slightly overlooked, you know, because the recommendations from that working group on governance have already gone to Council. And then here we are as the expert committee on governance looking at the report after the event. And I'd certainly like to hear if there are plans in motion to have, you know, for this committee, this was discussed at the last meeting, for this committee to have appropriate working groups of people who are on this committee to talk about matters such as governance. I have to confess at this stage, I was interviewed. I was one of those people. I hope that as somebody who is professionally qualified in governance, I rather hope I haven't sort of diluted the professional standing of members. I'd like to think that's not the case, but I was interviewed for the record. But I do think it's a great shame. I mean, surely everybody on this committee should have been interviewed, because this is the PGA committee. So if I'm the only one who was interviewed, that is not ideal, clearly. But my general message here is, look, if we are the PGA committee, which includes governance, which is a serious issue, yeah, I don't believe the working party made up of people who aren't on this committee reporting to Council is the right arrangement at all. That committee should be reporting, that working group should be reporting to this committee. It should be this committee that has a working group on governance. And we would then work very closely, much more closely, with any internal audit on governance to make sure that we were all involved. And we could then trust and believe in the outcomes of that report. So that would be my comment on the matter, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jarvis. As you know, we have already raised this issue about the corporate governance working group, and I hope that we will change the arrangement for the future. I think someone has got their hand up, but I can't see who it is. Do you know, Berna?
No, not it.
Chairman, it's me.
It's Councillor Durham.
My chat is still not live, I'm afraid.
Is this about corporate governance, Councillor Durham?
It's on the skills topic that Councillor Nunn was mentioning. Okay. And I would just, I have to say, and it's rather a sad indictment, that actually in nearly 10 years on this authority, nobody's ever asked me what I've done in my business life, what qualifications I have, what outside professional bodies I belong to, and I have to say that member development has been poor, apart from some initial training on being elected. There's been very little. So as I said, I wasn't interviewed in this particular occasion, nor have I been in nearly 10 years on this authority, and I think that is as I said, it's a sad indictment and should be corrected, because members, as Councillor Nunn has pointed out, members have skills, and if nobody knows what those skills are, we can't use people to their best advantage. Thank you.
All right, good point, Councillor Durham. I believe Councillor Hurd wants to come back on something. Councillor Hurd.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I may have to eat my words. I certainly have spoken to somebody about overview and scrutiny, but if Ms Donnelly can provide me with the dates, I will confirm that. But that may have been another audit away from this. But I wouldn't want to mislead the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hurd. Any other members that want to speak on this item? If not, we'll go on to flooding risk management audit. Emma, please.
Yes, this is on page 47. So we conducted a review of the Council's flood risk management framework, and we've provided an assessment of moderate assurance. And we found that due to staff changes, the new lead officer for flood risks had yet to undertake any relevant flood training at the time of audit. However, we note that the previous flood lead has now returned to the Council on a temporary basis to support training and this knowledge transfer. Secondly, we found that the Strategic Flood Protection Plan and associated actions hadn't been updated since 2018-19. Work is now underway to update the Flood Risk Master Plan, which is due to be reviewed at the next Coastal and Flood Risk Group meeting this month. I'm not sure if that's already happened or not yet. Thirdly, no formal meetings on flooding, both internally and externally, during 2020 had been conducted due to COVID-19. Again, work on this has also resumed with the lead specialist for community working with parties to establish meetings remotely and progress the plan. And fourthly, the Council did not have clear guidance on roles and responsibilities for sustainable urban drainage systems. This again will be picked up through the new flood risk strategy document, and the lead specialist for community might be able to provide a bit more information on the work that's undertaken on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Emma. I think Councillor Channer wants to come in on this one. Councillor Channer?
I'm here, sorry, it's playing around with my muting and everything.
Worries.
Yes, on the report, I think it's page 53, I'm doing it from memory, you mentioned the flooding and coastal group hadn't met since December. Well, I've been in a recent flooding and coastal group meeting only recently, and I'm just wanting to check that it's the same one that you're talking about, or is there more than one? And Mr. Dodson, who's here, might be able to throw some light on that. Is the one that's mentioned in the report the one that I attended recently? And I thought I'd been in an earlier meeting in the year as well. So I just want to check if it's one and the same.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Channer. I think Mr. Geller, Damien Geller, can answer that.
Hello, Councillor. Yes, I would advise that is the same meeting. Basically, at the time of the audit, when the draft and the checks were done, there wasn't a meeting that had taken place. But as of the 15th of September, the first coastal and flooding group meeting did take place. So yes, that's the meeting you're referring to. Thank you.
Okay, you happy with that, Councillor Channer? The answer? Yeah. Councillor Swain, I think you had some question on flooding.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The first one is this question about SARS expertise. We do rely on Essex as a lead local flood authority for as the experts on SARS. I'm not sure whether the auditor is advocating us having a similar level of expertise in the district as well. Secondly, on a similar point really relating to flood risk assessment, the consideration of the risks involved in fluvial and tidal risks is a very specific specialist knowledge base. Again, is the auditor advocating that we should have someone who is really clued up in all of these areas? My third point concerns the action plans, which are admittedly out of date and need to be updated. With action plans, does the auditor advocate that these plans should include specific actions, identify who's responsible for carrying them out, and also responsibilities for existing drainage assets? Thank you.
Emma, do you want to answer that at all?
Yeah, I can start, but Damien might be able to assist me further. For the first two comments, I guess our approach would be, as long as the council can provide assurance that there they have the support there from Essex, and they are able to, I guess, demonstrate that those risks have been mitigated through the working with Essex County Council, and then that would satisfy, I guess, our requirements in terms of what we would expect to see. So as long as they're able to demonstrate that they have access to that level of specialism through that mechanism.
I can confirm that's the case. We have quite strong working relationships with Essex, and in fact we're waiting for follow-up reports in relation to a number of different schemes, so that we can basically work with them to make sure those schemes are carried out, and also keep tabs on existing schemes as they're moving forward. Now, some of that work was, if you like, stalled by some of the COVID stuff, but it's now started to come back online.
Thank you, Damien. As we know, the lead flood authority is Essex County Council officers. So I hope that you have a person that you can liaise with on this rather than various different people at the county. Have you got a specific person that you always liaise with?
Yes, Councillor, we do. So I tie in quite closely with Dave Chapman, who provides me with a lot of advice and updates, and also who's going to be the main contact in terms of getting the Essex report back to us and working with us in terms of how we take those things forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Swain, did that answer? Sorry.
I'd just like to come back on the point about how specific the any action plan coming out of this would be in tying down responsibilities, including responsibilities for existing drainage systems.
Right, so at the level of the audit, there's various actions within the audit, and my details are against those. So I'm the officer that's responsible for monitoring performance against those actions. When we start looking at the individual plans, they are split differently between different officers. So there's some bits that I will have specific control over. There's others that sit with other officers in the council. What my intention is to do is that as we start to update some of our documents with particular regard to the flood master plan, flood risk master plan, would be to try and include officers' names against that plan, so we know who's leading on what. So that's already in there. It just needs updating and sharpening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, or was it in relation to perhaps management companies set up on the various major sites? Was it in relation to that? Because I know that the SUDs will come under some of those management companies.
It is another aspect of tying down responsibilities for assets, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Damien. I think Councillor Channer wanted to come back on something, please.
Madam Chairman, just a question so I understand something really. Page 58, and it talks about fieldwork and the lead officer again. It mentions Shirley Hall as well. Now, I think it's now Damien. So I'm just trying to work out, bearing in mind the length of time that Shirley Hall's left the authority, why perhaps that officer's name is still shown, why perhaps it wasn't corrected. I'm not making an issue out of this, but it's a bit confusing when you see that, when in fact we've had another officer in situ who appears to be doing this. I think the report ought to reflect the correct names really, because the next question I'll be asking about the fieldwork, has it commenced? And when I read the text, it doesn't appear as though it has. So I think it's quite important so we're clear who has got that responsibility within the authority and not have the names of someone who left actually several months ago.
Right, thank you, Chan. I don't know whether you want to come back on that, Emma, just to explain.
Yeah, I guess that there probably should have been updated, but whenever the terms of reference were initially issued, Shirley was the lead on that, but it should have been updated to reflect that Damien's now in post.
Okay, thank you. Bernard, have we got any other? Are you happy with that, Councillor Channer?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, Bernard, have we got any other people that want to speak on this?
No,
I'm
Chairman.
not seeing anyone else.
Well,
okay.
Councillor Durham has his hand up, but it may be a legacy hand. I'm not quite sure.
Councillor Durham, did you want to speak on flood risk?
No, I have been trying to get my hand down. I think you'll find it is down now, Bernard.
It is, yes, it's down now. Thank you.
It's down now. Yeah. Okay. So, committee, we have made lots of comments on these reports. So the recommendation was that we do that, consider, comment and improve. So are we happy to do that? Can I just have a yes or no? Or...
Yes.
Agreed.
Noted.
Yes, I don't think we need to take a proper vote. We're fine with that, aren't we?
Agreed. Madam Chairman, could I ask that then the comments we've made and the actions, they'll be clearly recorded, so we know what actions will come out of our comments and stuff?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, we will make sure the minutes reflect that. And going forward, perhaps we need some kind of follow-up on the actions, which I'll discuss with the clerks and the officers.
Thank you.
All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, we're agreeing that by assent, yes?
Yeah, we are agreeing it by assent, Bernard. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item is external audit fees report for 2019-20, found on pages 61 to 68. So we have Mr. Wisdom, Craig Wisdom here, I think, to present this report, please.
Chair, I wasn't going to say anything specific on it because the covering paper that the 151 officer put in, I think, covers the discussions certainly that we've had both in the lead up to and in the discussion of that. So I'm happy to just take questions.
Okay, thank you. Well, just to let you know, members, that Councillor Jarvis and myself have had discussions with Mr. Wisdom prior to this report being produced, and the fee has been considerably reduced as a result. So can I take questions? Berna, have we, Councillor, heard your flashing? Does that mean you?
Councillor Nunn has indicated.
None. Councillor Nunn. Councillor Nunn.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and I'm grateful to you and Councillor Jarvis for negotiating a reduction. It's nevertheless still £54,762. And this is not really a question for Mr. Wisdom. It's a broader question for the officers about, have we benchmarked the audit fee with other comparable sized local authorities, and have we benchmarked the fee with other audit providers? Thank you.
I think the answer to that is yes, Councillor Nunn, but Mr. Wisdom, do you want to just confirm?
Shall I take that question, Chairman?
Okay, Mr. Leslie then, sorry.
I think the answer is yes. We have benchmarked across Essex, and we are seeing similar sort of fees. Obviously, it will vary from council to council for various reasons, and there are different suppliers across those different councils. So although we've only taken the councils close to us and done a sample with those, they do cover other audit firms as well. And a bit about the process. Perhaps it is touched on in the report, but it does include the PSAA. You will see in there, and they will have the ultimate say around fees, as well as a bit of discussion about that in there. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Is there anyone else, Berna, who wants to speak?
No, Chairman.
Councillor Hurd, your picture is flashing. Does that mean you want to speak?
No, Chair. No, Chairman, no, sorry.
All right, okay, so the recommendation is that the contents of this report be noted. Can I have a seconder to that?
Noted. Sorry? Seconded, noted.
Yes, second. Okay,
Agreed.
And everyone is happy with that?
Noted.
By assent. Yeah. Okay, so we've agreed that by assent then, Berna. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
So the next item is item 8, external audit update 2019-20, found on pages 69 to 94. So again, if you want to speak, please use the chat function. So Mr. Wisdom, you want to speak on this one? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
So I'll just draw out the key observations, if I may. In terms of the status of our audit, it is nearing completion, and with the exception of some work related to asset valuations and the pension liability, both of which I'll touch on just now, the remaining work is related to our normal finalisation procedures. The scope of our work has remained broadly in line with what we described in our audit plan that you saw in July. There were, however, two key impacts. The first was that we elevated the risk around the valuation of property, plant and equipment and investment property from an area of focus to a significant risk, and that was due to areas that we identified through the course of our work in the current year, in combination with areas that we had also identified in the previous years. Again, I'll touch on that a little bit later. The second area of impact was due to COVID-19. We have included a summary of that impact, which you can see on pages 76 to 78 of the pack, and that also includes how we responded. The impact on the audit was both in terms of the accounts as well as the actual practical delivery of the audit. So in terms of the accounts, the key impact areas, and you'll see this when you approve the final accounts, where that additional narrative reporting and disclosures were needed in the accounts. So there were a number of areas, but a couple of examples of the more prominent ones would be the disclosures actually describing the impact of COVID on the council, and also the disclosures around critical judgments in the accounts and policies. Another key area are the impact on the valuation of property, plant and equipment and investment properties, where there is a material uncertainty over the valuation. I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail when I talk about the significant risk areas. So I'll touch on this now. Another area is the valuation of the pension fund, both from an assumptions and asset perspective. And the final area really that I pull out was in relation to the expected credit losses for assets accounted for under IFRS 9, so that's International Financial Reporting Standard 9. On the delivery side, your team had to prepare remotely and we had to deliver the audit remotely, which was challenging, but we used technology and project management tools extensively to manage this, and you know, reflecting on it, I think that it went well. And again, I'll add some comments in conclusion to my report. If I just touch briefly on each of the significant risk areas, these are on pages 79 to 81 of the pack. The first one is management override controls. This is an assumed risk under international auditing standards, and one that we have on every audit that we do. The focus of our work is on key areas of estimate and judgment, along with looking for inappropriate journals. Our work in this area was satisfactory, although we did identify a control recommendation, which we've noted on page 79. The second area is valuation of property assets. So we focus on this because there's a lot of judgment involved. There are two things I'd like to pull out. The first is, as I mentioned just now, there is additional complexity that's been added due to COVID, and that has led to your valuer including a material uncertainty clause in the valuation information that they provided to you. The clause was included because of the volatility in the markets at the time, at the time of year end, which was the 31st of March. So, for example, it was difficult to judge what would happen to things like build costs of specialized assets, or for non-specialized assets. There was no real comparable market information for the situation which was created by the pandemic. The material uncertainty I referred to is disclosed in your accounts, and I also refer to it in my auditor's opinion. But a couple of specific things on that material uncertainty. One is that this is a common clause that's been added by valuers across the public sector in valuations of this type.
I'll bring you back, please.
So there's nothing unusual about the clause that's been added to Malden's valuations. The second thing to just add is that although I refer to it in my opinion, this is not a qualification or a modification of my opinion. So I'm just drawing attention to it. The second thing I want to pull out on property, around the property work that we did, was that during our testing we did identify material errors, and I referred to those earlier, which is the reason why we escalated it to a significant risk. The actual errors that we identify are summarised in the Deloitte view box on page 80 of the pack. And because of the errors that we identified, we have had to extend the work that we've done, that we've had to do in this area, to be satisfied that there are no further material errors. So that additional work that we're doing at the moment is still in progress, and we are hoping to finalise that in the coming weeks. The final sort of specific area that I wanted to touch on, whilst not a significant risk, it is an area of focus, and that's pensions. As I said earlier, this is also an area that's impacted by the volatility caused by COVID. We do focus on both the asset side of the pension liability as well as the actuarial assumptions that go into the liability. Our work in this area is almost complete, and we're in the final stages of just assessing the final bits of information that have come back from the actuaries as well as the pension scheme auditors. So just if I move on now to the work on the arrangements to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness of the council's use of resources, which is on page 83 of the pack. Just a reminder that I'm required to consider the arrangements that are in place and not whether the council has achieved good use of resources at all times. I also conclude on the arrangements, but we do focus our work in on things, on certain areas like, for example, financial sustainability. Through the course of the work, I didn't identify any significant risks, and so therefore there weren't any areas that I investigated in further detail. Just before I move on to my final conclusion, I'd like to touch briefly on our control findings. These are included on pages 86 and 87 of the pack, with the main recommendation being in respect of the property valuations. I'd also like to add that we have followed up on our recommendations that we made last year, and that the council has made good progress on addressing those recommendations, which I think is reflected in the fact that the bulk of the audit work that was complete timetable. So there are a couple of things that have delayed us finalising, but actually we've probably got 95% of the work done by the first or second week of July, which was the original plan, which I think is a very good effort. I'd like to close, if I may, with a thank you to Chris and James and the finance team, who I think have pulled together the financial statements and the working papers to a good standard, particularly given the challenges of last year, and also the challenges that came about as a result of having to do remote working and frankly the operational challenges that came from operating through the pandemic. So, Chairman, I'd like to close my comments there, and I'm happy to take questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Wisdom. That was very comprehensive analysis of your report, and thank you for thanking our officers who've worked very hard on this. So thank you from me as well to our officers and to yourself, Mr. Wisdom. Bernard, have we got anyone? I think Councillor Channer would like to speak. Is there anyone else?
Nobody else at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Channer.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. It's to do with page, if I can find it, 78 now, if I may. It's Appendix 1, and it says COVID-related income received, and it's reference to the 1.6 billion, the first tranche passed out to councils by MCHLG. And it says what the council did, and then it said, we note that after discussion and reference to guidance, these have been treated correctly in the updated statement of accounts. Can you just sort of explain a bit behind that? I think it's obviously linking with the grant and the young ring fencing and everything you refer to, but can you just explain what correction was required, please?
We're just playing with the mute button. So it was what we were talking about there is, because it was a ring fence grant, it was required to be booked as within the current year accounts rather than deferred. So it's as simple as that, really. There wasn't it was a judgmental area, and there wasn't anything I were significant in that regard.
Right. So just so I'm clear, the grant was unring-fenced and without conditions. Are you saying that is what government said, or what you're relating to Malden?
No, the letter actually, the letter that came with the grant, said it was unring-fenced, and because it's unring-fenced, that's what drives the accounting treatment.
Okay,
so
right.
It was a government. It was the bit that came from government rather than our Malden's decision or certainly.
Okay, that's how I read it. I just wanted to make sure that was my reading of it. But I was interested to know when you said that in reference to guidance, they've been treated correctly in the updated statements of accounts.
That's the SIFRA guidance. Sorry, that's the guidance, the accounting guidance rather than the government guidance.
Yeah. Okay, that's where I think I just wanted to seek the clarity there as well, because you know, it could be misinterpreted. Well, I did to a degree, but that's made it much clearer for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Channer. Anyone else want to ask any questions? Berna?
No, nobody's indicated.
No one else? Okay, so members, the recommendation is that we note the contents of the report. Have I got a seconder to that, please?
Happy to second. Noted.
Noted, Madam Chairman.
And everyone is happy with just agreeing assent on that one?
Yes, Madam Chairman, agreed.
Agreed, I said, Berna. So the next item on the agenda is quarterly review of corporate risk, found on pages 95 to 104. So we've got Ms. Hughes to present this report. So if I can ask Ms. Hughes to present the report, please.
Good afternoon, members. So this report deals with Q1 risk, which covers April to June 2020. In summary, for the changes since Q4, there are 2 risks that have seen a decrease in score. These are R17, which is failure to maximise services through promotion and engagement, and R29, failure to deliver services as a result of COVID. This R29 was added as the pandemic hit, but by June, CLT had a better view on the service impact, so that's why it's seen a decrease. There are 2 risks that have been recommended for closure. One, R22 around contract management, and that's recommended for closure as the monitoring steps are now in place. R17 around promotion and engagement, further to the update that I gave above, just that we've actually got a promotion and engagement sort of formalised now. There are 3 risks that have seen an increase in score. These are around the 5-year housing land supply, around meeting affordable housing need, and around creating jobs to support the growing population. These have all seen an increase due to the wider impacts of the current pandemic. CLT continue to regularly monitor and review the risks given the emergency pandemic measures, and at an operational level, we now have the additional level of the balanced scorecard to report and monitor risks that have been removed from this corporate register, so that we can escalate them back up should the controls no longer be working. So, for example, with the contract management, the monitoring for that will now take place within the balanced scorecard, and we will be able to report back up should the risk escalate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Berna, have we got members that wish to ask a question?
Yes, Councillor Nunn and then Councillor Swain.
Okay, Councillor Nunn.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for the report, Cheryl. Can I take you, please, to page 101 and risk R14, which is around the human resource, and it's about recruitment and retention. And it says that the risk is unchanged, and it gives it as a 3x3, which, unless I'm mistaken, says it's a moderate risk. Does that mean then that in this latest report that the turnover rate is the same turnover rate that we had at the previous report? And if so, what is the turnover, please?
Ms. Hughes, could you answer that?
Yeah, so that risk actually isn't monitored by turnover rate. That's specific to specific skill sets. So that's to do with difficulty to recruit roles like planners. So the reason that that risk is unchanged is just that there are still some positions that have been difficult to recruit to. So the risk that we're carrying remains the same on that one. Regards turnover, I'm not sure of the specific figures, but they are being monitored in the HR dashboard at the moment.
So coming back through you, Chair, retention and recruitment is turnover. And so are you carrying the same number of vacancies in those specialist areas, or have you had the same number of leavers and new starters in those areas?
Excuse?
So I'm not sure if Richard wants to provide more specific information, because obviously this relates to his area, but I believe it's due to the specific positions that were already flagged still being vacant.
Mr. Holmes, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, I obviously haven't got the information immediately at my fingertips in terms of turnover. I'm happy to supply that to the committee in writing after this meeting. But I think Ms. Hughes is correct. We obviously track a number of jobs. I think we reflected yesterday. I think we've got about 16 new starters that have come to the authority during COVID. So they've actually started working for us virtually. So there is always an ebb and flow of staff, but I can get you the details for the turnover separately if that would help you.
Thank you. That would be helpful. Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Nunn?
Through the chair, if it helps, Richard, I'm not particularly probing deeply the turnover issue. I'm just trying to work out whether we're carrying specialist vacancies still, or we've got people coming to us, or have we got more specialists leaving? Now, I know in any organisation, turnover is not a bad thing, but it is if it's excessive, and it is if we're not filling the posts. That's all I'm trying to bottom out is, are we carrying specialist gaps?
Okay, that's helpful for that clarification. I can certainly give you the detail you're looking for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, anyone else got questions?
Councillor Swain and Councillor Channer.
Okay, Councillor Swain.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. In relation to R9 and R10, which are both really concerned with the economic situation in the district, and quite pessimistic on the back of COVID, but I would just express there is some optimism in that with the great increase in distance working and the scope for small businesses, plus the attraction of the area, there is an area there for promoting the district. And in view of what's said about, should we say, lack of a county-wide promotion approach, I wonder whether we should be considering, should we say, going our own way in terms of promoting the district to some extent. The other point is bringing in developments related to BRB. I think it's, what should we say, it's a totally different time scale. Anything related to BRB support or skills in relation to trying to improve inward investment and so on in the next year or two. My second point concerns R8 on the first page. I think the relationship of the South Malden Relief Road to development of strategic sites is the wrong way round. It's not that the relief road is going to affect the development, it's rather that the development of the strategic sites affects decisions on whether it be a South Malden Relief Road. So I don't think that is a break on development of far greater importance for the future of particularly the developing or supposed development of North Heybridge Garden suburb is what happens to the junction on the A12, getting to the A12. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Mr. Dodson, did you want to come in on that, on some of those questions?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Regarding the promotion of the district, I think Councillor Swain's right. There are opportunities as well as issues that arise from the COVID emergency, and it's something we're actively looking at, is how we maximise the recovery of the district and promote the opportunities that come from that in terms of location of business, etc., as we come out of that. So yes, that's something we're looking at. In terms of the second point regarding R8, I think at the point that the report was written, the members had actually refused the permission for one of the provisionally through the first meeting, permission for one of the strategic sites within the South Malden Garden suburb. Subsequently, that was approved, but obviously if that hadn't come forward, all of the affordable housing within that wouldn't have come forward, and that would have had a direct impact. So that was mainly what that related to. And the road itself was almost a secondary issue to that, but it was that the site wasn't coming forward at the time. Thank you.
Councillor Swain, are you happy with that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Anna, have we got anyone else that wishes to speak?
Councillor Channer.
Councillor Channer.
Sorry, Chairman. I'm sorry, Councillor Channer. I'm unable to raise or get onto chat. So if you could put me on your list at the moment.
Okay. All right. We'll ask you after Councillor Channer. Councillor Durham.
Right. In a way, it's been answered now because Councillor Swain's referred to R8, which is on page 99, which I was, and it does say Q1. But the report's here now, and we're sitting near towards the end of September. And actually, I just asked why the report wasn't necessarily updated with members having approved the planning application, because I think I seem to recollect actually, although I couldn't sit on it for various reasons, that committee when it sat was done in pretty swift succession. So I just wondered why, when did Q1 end? Because I'm sure Q2 would make it accurate, but I thought because of the close succession of the refusal and the approval, perhaps the report could have been updated, because otherwise I think it can create a bit of confusion. That's just perhaps a comment, but I would like to know when the Q1 specifically ended and why the approval, which I thought was very swift on following on from the refusal, couldn't have been implemented in the report, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. Ms Hughes, do you want to answer that one?
So Q2 ends at the end of September, which is why you're seeing Q1 report at the moment. It's just because of the way that the timing falls with the reporting coming forwards. So this covers till the end of June. So it would have factored in the decision that was made until the end of June.
Right.
Okay. You happy with that, Councillor Channer?
Well, was it the Knowles Farm application? Because if it was, I thought the refusal and the approval went pretty swiftly. Maybe I'm recollecting incorrectly.
If I could add that, Chairman, they may have been close together, but it certainly wasn't within the first quarter when the final decision to approve was made. Hence why it falls there. I can't remember the exact date. I can obviously check that for you, Councillor Channer, but from memory, that did fall outside of the first quarter, hence the reason why the report is as it is.
Okay.
Happy with that, Councillor Channer?
Yes, I am. It might be because I think there was one fairly recently which seemed to be hinging more to do with the road, even, well, I'll wait till I get the answer from the information rather. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Channer. Councillor Durham?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, yes, my just seems to be falling over this afternoon. I just would really wanted to respond to a comment Councillor Swain has made. In my county role, I'm also chair of Visit Essex, and for his benefit, Visit Essex are just about to embark on a fairly significant promotional activity, concentrating on the Essex coastline, and clearly clearly Malden will feature fairly heavily in that. We're very mindful of the issues that the Malden district has. So he can rest assured that from the county and Visit Essex perspective, we're doing all we can to help promote Malden, and all we have.
Well, that is great to hear, Councillor Durham. We've got Councillor Hurd, have we? Or Councillor Swain, I think, wanted to come in again. Councillor Swain, is it in relation to the planning application query?
It's just very briefly to say, if in view of the, should we say, the updating aspect of R8, what would the risk have fallen back to? At the moment, it's increased through.
I don't have that to hand at the moment, but obviously that will be reported at the next committee. I can provide that offline, or it will come to the next committee.
Yeah. Well, I think, Councillor Swain, if we can wait for the next committee in the next quarter's report, that would probably answer your query. Councillor Hurd.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just proffering the date. I think it was the 20th of August.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm sure Ms Hughes will make a note and follow that up for us. Thank you. Anyone else wanting to speak on corporate risk?
Nothing I've seen.
Yeah.
No, Chair.
No one else? Well, we had the 4 recommendations, noting the scoring, commenting and reviewing any of the corporate risk scores. So members were happy with the scores that the CLT have put in the risk report. So if we are, could I have a seconder to those 4 recommendations, please?
Happy to, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. Is everyone on the committee happy to agree that rather than taking a vote?
Yes,
agreed.
Okay, so we've agreed that by assent then, Berna, thank you.
Thank you.
And the next agenda is quarter 1 review of corporate performance, which is on pages 105 to 126. And again, we've got Ms Hughes to present this report. Again, there are 3 recommendations for us to comment on, to see if it's being managed effectively. We need to think about the report to strategy and resources, setting out the recommendation changes in light of impacts on outcome performance, including COVID. So I'll go to Ms Hughes, please. Thank you.
So members, the quarter 1 performance report again covers April to June 2020. You'll see from the report that work is largely on track and the outcomes are being delivered. But from some of the comments, the way that we thought we would deliver things has changed, and activity has sometimes been diverted, largely due to the impact of COVID. You'll see in section 3.3 of the covering report, there's a summary table that highlights for each of the 3 themes the number of measures that are either on track or otherwise. This follows feedback at previous committee meetings to give that high level view. Section 3.4 specifically draws out the areas at risk by theme. In part, these are in large part impacted by COVID, and they are for the community strategy, the customer evaluations survey for the private sector housing grants, the Malden District Council digital services assistance, the community weight management sessions, for place, the local volunteering activity, Keeping Britain Tidy Green Flag Award, and the 2019 Strategic Flood Projects and Maintenance Plan. And for prosperity, the percentage of strategic sites promoted through partners and the occupancy at the Enterprise Hub. However, some of the new activity that's been taking place where resources have been diverted has included things like virtual fitness campaigns, grow your own vegetables, direct engagement with those in isolation risk groups for COVID, which far surpasses the original target number for people we expected to reach. An increase in channel shift as a result of the way that we've shifted to online services. Volunteering activity being used for open spaces has been redeployed for the COVID response. And we've had conversation with 80 businesses in the high street as part of the COVID response. So in light of this, there is an additional recommendation this time for a review of the corporate plan and the targets to go to Strategy and Resources Committee to reflect that there's a bit of a changing landscape and that it's had an impact on those outcome measures. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Cheryl. Could you just tell me when that is likely to be going to corporate strategy and resources, this corporate the changes that you're talking about that we're recommending from this committee to prepare a report for the strategy and resources. So that report is proposed to go to which meeting of strategy and resources?
If I could answer that, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Dawson.
Yes, I think even since we drafted this report, we're going to have possibly a more significant review of the corporate plan because of all of the changing conditions that we've had. We're doing some work on it and have put together a project plan to do some work through October and into November. Then I would envisage that potentially following statutory annual council, we'll do a workshop with members to present that work. And then subsequently at the following Strategy and Resources Committee, we'll take the initial report then. So I've not got the dates in front of me, but the timeline would seem to be December to get that through. Okay. I can check that. And advise.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify, Mr. Dodson, exactly what you're expecting this committee to do in this recommendation to preparing this report.
I think really it's just recognising the impact of the COVID emergency and endorsing the fact that we need to undertake that review, which then we will take through strategy and resources as the appropriate route in developing the corporate plan.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So, Berna, do we have any member that wishes to ask some questions?
Councillor Swain. Chairman.
Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chairman. There's several on place and prosperity. Firstly, on the page 116, about waste, and I think this has cropped up before. Can we have incorporated in this some information, some data about waste recycling at the council tip to incorporate and combine with purely district council related statistics? Secondly, there are several areas that are mentioned relating to housing, but I guess anything there is rather up in the air at the moment, but because of the government's attitude on, or the government's new plans on housing or possible developments. Yeah. The on-place outcomes, I think it comes back to the point I was making earlier about reporting to committees by workshops. On place supporting plans, page 121, it mentions the Malden District, this is K, Malden 2019 Strategic Flood Projects and Maintenance Plan. Where is that plan that one can inspect, please? And then on prosperity outcomes, it raises this point about how much we can do or expect to do in relation to preparation for BRB. And then there was a mention of the place board. Can you say who are the place board? And do they report to any committee? Lastly, on 125 about tourism promotion, you mentioned that some additional material has been put online about walking and cycling. Do you have any plans to produce more information about the district that previously perhaps the Tourist Information Centre might have had? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Swain. I think Mr. Holmes was wanting to answer some of those.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up on the couple of points regarding waste, as you've correctly identified, that is an Essex County Council facility, which obviously they are responsible for operating. So I will approach Essex County Council to see if we can get some data that aligns with our timeline, so that you can actually make a comparison. But it is a self-contained unit, which obviously the County Council are responsible for the operation of and disposal of all the materials that go through that. The flood plan, I'll have to come back to members with the exact location for that. I suspect it is shared on an iDrive, but I need to give you the exact location for it. So I will circulate that after the meeting.
Thank you.
And the other question was about place. Is that something you can answer, Mr. Holmes? Sorry, Mr. Dodson.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that one. The place board relates to the Sense of Place board, so the Sense of Place initiative, which is a business-led initiative which the council was also part of in developing. Must be around 5 years ago now that it started. As it's an independent initiative, it doesn't report directly to a council committee. The council sits on the board and is represented through the chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee as the member on the board, and any projects that go forward to the board that relate to the council itself will be subject to going through committee for any endorsement. So if there's financial contributions, for example, to any of those projects that are in the Sense of Place action plan, then they would be obviously subject to council committee in that way.
Thank you. I think Councillor Swain would have liked to have known where perhaps he might see those notes from the meeting, even though it's an outside board. If we've got representation from S&R, is there any way that those notes of meetings can be seen?
Those notes of meetings we're going to, I'm not going to say they're directly available now, because I'm sure if I do they won't be, but we're looking to make sure they're available on the library on ModGov, to make sure that there's feedback from those external groups there.
Okay, thank you. Is that answer all your questions, Councillor Swain? I'm not sure if all of them were addressed.
Yes, no, the others were just comments, really, but I certainly hope that Mr. Holmes can direct me to the flood projects and maintenance plan.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Channer, I think, wanted to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just going to hopefully find it. Yes, it goes back actually to an earlier report to do with the audit, and we heard about the climate change strategy, and Damien Geller kindly advised us when that work was anticipated. However, on what I did notice was on this report, Appendix 1, page 121, it does say target is to submit draft strategy to committee by November 2020. And I think Mr. Geller advised it would be December 2020. So has there been some slippage and it will be December now, or is this the target and it will actually have to be November? Because the two don't quite tally. I appreciate it was information given in the meeting, but just I thought I would raise that point so we're clear when it can be anticipated.
Chairman, if I could help, I think we should stick within the December date. I think obviously there are other pressing priorities for Mr. Galler at the moment regarding COVID as well. So I'm conscious of his workload. So I would prefer to stick to the date he indicated in December, if that's possible, please.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else, Berna, who wants to speak?
No, Chairman.
No. Okay, so members, we have the 3 recommendations. One, reviewing the information. I think we've done that. The second one, to make sure the corporate performance is being managed effectively. And the third one, which I'm really not 100% sure on what we need to do here, that members ask officers to prepare a report for the Strategy and Resources Committee, setting out any recommended changes in light of impacts on outcome performance, including COVID. I'm not quite clear on that, Mr. Dodson, as to why this committee has to do that.
No.
Unless someone else on the committee can throw some light on why that would be the case.
If I can answer that, Chairman, this committee, officers don't need the permission of this committee to undertake that work, but at the same time, it underlines the need for it and reflects the changing conditions that we've seen through COVID and the performance issues that have arisen through that, and just endorses that approach that members are taking to take that work through strategy and resources. But technically, yes, it doesn't need that instruction from this committee to do that.
I don't think we need to do that, really. So can we remove that? Because I don't think we really need to do that here. I wouldn't have thought so. I don't think it was on the agenda meeting. I don't recall it. I don't know whether Councillor Jarvis is still here. I don't know whether he remembers this at the agenda meeting. But I don't see why we should have to do that at all. If you have got to prepare a report for strategy and resources in light of performance on that's been affected by COVID, which may affect the corporate plan, that's what you're indicating, isn't it? Yes. Then why would any of that come through this committee? I know it's performance indicators, but we're only checking that we're happy with the performance and the way that the council are dealing with it. I don't think we're needing to recommend anything to strategy and resources. So I don't really want to agree that recommendation.
Sorry, I think, Chairman, it's I think it was just a sort of courtesy nod as the sort of committee that we are responsible for performance, because a lot of the performance issues relate to COVID. I follow the logic that we're looking at performance. Because of those changes, and quite serious changes in performance, it would be not unreasonable for this committee to be encouraging, as officers are indicating, for the strategic committee to be having another look at the plan, which needs to change. I think it's a matter of, it seems fairly common sense to me. I mean, I don't think it's a big issue, but I think as a committee, we should be happy to endorse that the corporate plan is looked at, because performance issues are changing significantly because of COVID. I don't think it's any more or any less than that, if I've interpreted that right, Mr. Dobson.
Right, yeah.
I think it's just the wording of it probably that makes it sound as though, you know, it's something that we're insisting upon.
We're not giving anybody an instruction. We're not giving anybody an instruction, Chairman. We're just giving our sort of, we're happy to endorse that, I think, is what we're being asked to do as the performance committee.
Well, could we amend the wording, please, Berna, to say that members of this committee endorse the officers preparing a report rather than asking?
Yes, Chairman, no problem.
Are you happy with that, members? What do you think, Councillor Channing?
Well, could it reference something about the corporate plan then, if that's what the essence of that is really about?
Yes,
because that makes sense to me then, because I'm just thinking of a member of the public reading it. It's not quite clear.
Really?
So I think it might be helpful, because I must admit I looked at that, and actually I think it's good to change the wording. I'm not saying I have a problem with the principle of what the officers are seeking, but I think make it clearer that it is about the, so it's going to strategy and resources, and of course we know what their remit is, so it gets that linkage clear about why officers are seeking that. And yeah, I think the wording you've just applied is good, but I think it should make some reference about the corporate plan, because that's really what it's the basis of.
So we could add on the end and the effects and how it affects the corporate plan.
Yeah, or in relation to this corporate plan or something. In relation to it, yeah.
In relation to the corporate plan.
So we're doing endorse instead of ask, and in relation to the corporate plan at the end after COVID-19. Is that clear, Bernard?
Yeah. And if that's what Mr. Dodson was meaning, or whoever who wrote the report, if they're happy with that, then yeah.
Are officers happy with that change?
I'm happy with that approach, yes. Thank you, members.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Jarvis, for clarifying that. My brain is not functioning terribly well at the moment, as you can probably hear. So are we happy to second then, members, those 3 points on the recommendations of this?
Yes,
agreed, yeah.
So we're agreeing those on assent.
Yeah, all agree.
Agree.
Right, the next item is any other items of business that the chairman of the committee decides are urgent. I don't have any. So we will then close the meeting at 14:41. And thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Chairman.